Okay, so now we are dealing explicitly with factored form of a polynomial. So far, we've only been working in standard form, which standard form is when we have things that look like the previous problems we were working on. So things like, x to the third minus a, or 3x to the third minus x squared plus 9x minus 3. Now, factored form, let's think about what it means to be a factor. So factors, if I asked you like what are the factors of 10, you would probably say to me like 2 and 5 or 1 and 10 because 2 times 5 and 1 times 10 multiply to equal 10. So factoring are when things multiply together. So like here in our example we have negative times x minus 3 squared times x plus 1. Okay, so we have things that multiply together, okay? And if we were to multiply all this stuff out, okay, we would get it to standard form. So, we are not far from standard form. We're just working with a slightly different form. So in factored form, like we discussed on the Prezi, the number in front of your first parentheses containing an x is the leading coefficient. Okay, the zeros are the opposite of the numbers inside the parentheses, so we're going to be changing the signs. All right, and then let's see here. The multiplicity are the exponents on each factor, and the degree, we're going to add up the multiplicities. So, let's see what happens. So our leading coefficient now. Leading coefficient is the number in front of our first parenthesis containing an x, which I don't see a number in front of my parenthesis. So secretly, there's a negative 1 in front. Okay, so for our leading coefficient, it'd be negative 1. Now the zeros, technically what we're doing to find the zeros are setting each of these equal to 0. So we could say like, x minus 3 equals 0, x plus 1 equals 0. Okay, which you could do this and you could solve them. Okay, so like you'd add the 3 on both sides, right? Those would cancel out and you get x equals 3. And on this one you'd subtract the 1 on both sides. Okay, which these would cancel out and that would turn to negative 1. Okay, so you could sit here and do that, but the shortcut is, if you notice, these are just the opposite signs. So you can take these numbers and just change the signs. So whatever's in the parenthesis or whatever's in your factored form, just change the signs and you have your zeros. Okay, so, and I'm going to write my zeros out here for a certain reason. I'll explain why in just a moment. Okay, so my zeros. Okay, I'm going to write them over here. The opposite of negative 3 is positive 3, so it'd be x equals 3. And guys, make sure you write this as x equals 3 because zeros are x-intercepts, okay? And x-intercepts occur on the x-axis at x equals 3. So you do need the x when you write these. All right, my other 0, the opposite of positive 1 is negative 1. Okay, so these are my zeros. Now the multiplicity of each 0, that is the exponent on that factor that pertains to each of these zeros. So when x is 3, this pertains to this factor. The 3 is associated with this, and the exponent on that factor is 2. So the multiplicity of this 0 is 2, and the multiplicity when x equals negative 1, that pertains to this parenthesis. Well, I don't see the exponent. It's not there. But remember, when there's not an exponent, there's secretly a 1 there. So my exponent is 1, which means my multiplicity on that 0 is 1. All right, in the degree, you just take your multiplicities and add them together. So one of my multiplicities is 2, and one of them is 1. So I add them together, and bam, I get 3. Okay, so be careful. Okay, in factored form, it is different than standard form. Standard form, when it looks something like what I just showed you, so like one of these, the degree is the highest exponent you see. Okay, so like this one was a degree 3, and this one was also a degree 3 because the highest exponent was a 3. Okay, now you guys, it's not the highest exponent. In factored form, you have to add up all the exponents. So be careful. People like to confuse factored form and standard form. Factored form, you add them. Standard form, you pick the highest exponent. So be careful. All right, awesome job, you guys.